I prostrate to the Arya triple gem. Thus did I hear at one time the Bhagawan was dwelling on Massive Vulture's mountain in Rashigriha, together with a great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagawan was absorbed in the concentration on the categories of phenomena called profound perception. Also at that time, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara looked upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom and beheld those 5 aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Sorry, I don't think I've got this one. No. Must be dead. Then, through the power of the Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara: how should any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Shariputra: Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom should look upon it like this: correctly and repeatedly beholding those 5 aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty, emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form. Form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness, without characteristic, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no body, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomenon. There is no I element, and so on up to and including no mind element and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, and so on up to and including no aging and death, and no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and dwell in the perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration and without fear. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach the end point of nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the 3 times also manifestly completely awaken to unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment in reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequaled, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering should be known as truth, since it is not false. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is declared: Tayata gate gate padagate padasam gate bodhi soha. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagawan arose from that concentration and commended the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage. It is like that. It is like that. One should practice a profound perfection of wisdom, just as you have indicated. Even the Tathagatas rejoice. The Bhagawan, having thus spoken, the Venerable Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, those surrounding in their entirety, along with the worlds of gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, were overjoyed and highly praised that spoken by the Bhagawan. I prostrate to the gathering of the Dakinis in the 3 chakras, who abide in the holy yoga of using space. By your powers of clairvoyance and magical emanations, look after practitioners like a mother her child. Akasamara Sashadosa, Akasamara Sashadosa. Akasamara Sashadosa Samaraya Pe. Tayatha gate gate padagate padasam gati bodhi soha. By the teaching of the three supreme jewels, possessing the power of truth, may inner and outer hindrances be transformed, may they be dispelled, may they be pacified, may they be completely pacified. May all negative forces opposed to Dharma be completely pacified. May the host of 80,000 obstacles be pacified. May we be separated from problems and harmful conditions to the Dharma. May all enjoyments be in accord with the Dharma, and may there be auspiciousness and perfect happiness here right now. Okay, so Tuesday evenings have experienced a bit of disjointedness, just, with various things over the last few months. So just a reminder that we're on exploring the path, and we're looking at the hymn of experience. Last time, which I can't remember when last time was, a while ago, we finished off with looking at the four greatnesses of the teaching, which was summarized in the verse 7, through which you can actualize that all the teachings are without contradiction. That was one. Understand all the scriptures as an instruction, easily find the intention of the conqueror, and be protected from the abyss of very faulty conduct. So the four greatnesses there of the Lam Rim instructions. And so this evening we're going on to look at the need for a spiritual teacher and the qualities of the spiritual teacher, which seems quite timely with the departure of Geshe Sharap, or the coming and the teaching and departure then of Geshe Sharap. How precious are those teachings, and Geshe-la's wisdom and experience as a teacher. So we don't have any doubt of his qualities. So in verse 8, it says, contemplate the meaning of this method, in other words, the Lam Rim. What does it say? The stages of the path of what analytical person would not be captivated by the stages of the path of the three types of beings? So the Lam Rim. Contemplate the meaning of this method that gathers the essence of all the scriptures. So of all the Buddha's 84,000 teachings, even teaching or hearing a single session definitely gathers great waves of the assembled benefits of explaining or listening to the Holy Dharma. So just, a single session of having heard teachings on the Lam Rim. So we can think, wow, how much opportunity we've had so many teachings on the Lam Rim, whether we've heard those online or whether we've been face to face with the teacher. So that, definitely gathers unimaginable waves of merit that we have accumulated through that. And so then coming to verse 9, this is what we're focusing on for this evening. Rely correctly and with effort in thought and action on the holy spiritual friend, the teacher of the path, and the foundation perfectly bringing auspiciousness for all the excellent collections of this and future lives. Having seen this, do not give him up, even at the cost of your life, and please them with the offering of practicing just as they instruct. You, the perfect Guru, practice in this way. I, who am seeking liberation, will also practice in this way. So that the last two lines in all these verses, as was written by Lama Tsongkhapa, was, I, the yogi, practice in this way. You who are seeking liberation should also practice this way. But the more current translation has it so that we actually are saying to Lama Tsongkhapa, you practice in this way, and I, who am seeking liberation, will follow in your footsteps. Okay, so we'll look at this verse in some detail. So the first thing is of looking at the need for a spiritual teacher. So Karam Geshe Potawa, this is a quote from Geshe Potawa. So he was a close disciple of Drontompa, and his close disciples were Geshe Sharawa and Geshe Langri Tangpa. So Geshe Chegawa, who wrote the 7-point cause and effect, and then Geshe Langri Tangpa had found just, no, it's the other way around, isn't it? Delete that. Okay, that's enough said. I'm confusing my history here. Yeah, so anyway, Geshe Sharawa and Geshe Langri Tangpa were his students. Sharawa. Yeah. Geshe Chegawa came later. Okay. So Geshe Potawa said, in order to obtain liberation, there's nothing more important than a teacher. Although you may be able to do the activities of this life by watching others, without a teacher, you will not do them well. How can someone who has just arrived from a bad migration get to a place they've never been without a teacher? See, we don't know what our past lives were. We don't know what our previous life was. But this thing of needing a teacher, not just observing. When I was at Vajrayana Institute for 12 years with Geshe Thubten, and after 10 years or so, I requested teachings about ritual. I'd always told Geshe I was very interested in ritual, how to do this and that. He said, you just watch. I'm like, Geshe, I've been watching you for 10 years and I have picked up a lot of things. Well, I didn't quite go into the detail, but observing that I had observed carefully for that period of time and picked up a number of things through observation, because often it wouldn't be until after years that Geshe would say, like, for example, at one refuge ceremony, and so we had the chairs out and without tables. And so what we used to do was put the text cloth on the chair where people's bottoms go and put the text on top, thinking that'll be fine. And it's not. It took him 10 years to tell us that. So it was like, yeah, never forgotten that one. And we'll not forget that one. Perhaps he was hoping we'd get to it in that time. But that thing of observing and being able to pick up certain things, but it doesn't give you the teachings, does it? I mean, anything we learn in life, going to school, I mean, you can observe a teacher for as long as you like, you're still not going to learn your ABC. So when we look at it in the Dharma context, we have, different terms for our teachers. When we're talking about this need for a spiritual teacher, we're really looking at it in terms of, a fully qualified and go through the qualifications of the teacher. But we generally say Lama or Guru. Guru is the Sanskrit, and Lama in Tibetan, which is the idea of being laden with qualities. So the idea is that we know the qualities that we're looking for, we're reflecting on those and the need for those. We also have other terms that are used, not necessarily teacher, sometimes not a teacher. So, for example, a tulku, literally meaning an emanation body, taking the Manakaya aspect, in other words, taking an aspect that would benefit us. So a bodhisattva on the first ground is able to emanate like 100 bodies, and then it goes up from there. So taking, in our case, human form for our benefit to gain the teachings. So that's the meaning of tulku. And then Rinpoche can be one of those reincarnate emanations, The word Rinpoche means precious or precious one. And so, but also it can be bestowed probably more when someone becomes like an abbot or so forth. When you say Ken Rinpoche. And we have our Geshis, that's what we are most familiar with, the Geshe. So that is a shortened form of Gewei Shenyen. So that means virtuous friend. And if we see Lama Zopa Rinpoche refers to the Guru, the Lama, as the virtuous friend most often. He talks about the virtuous friend. So if we think about, really, we have different levels of teachers, but if we think about someone at the level of a Geshe, and we've just had the experience of that over the weekend and had the experience before, somebody who has trained, for at 25 years or more, in monastic studies on the scriptures, that they really know their stuff, so they're at a great level of wisdom and experience and understanding. And Kempo, which again can be referred to an abbot, means learned one. So generally, by the time someone gets to be the abbot of our monastery, they're already sort of being recognized as somebody highly skilled, and not just in the skill of running a monastery. I think that comes later, but they're highly regarded. And so then, all the students in that monastery regard them as their teacher. Not necessarily their heart teacher, but as a teacher of theirs. It may be their heart teacher, particularly if they're little ones coming up through the monastery. Okay. So then looking at the qualities of the teacher, of course, we have Lama Zopa Rinpoche's extensive writing. I mean, there's many commentaries, but the extensive writing on the classic, traditional presentation on the teacher, but with many, many examples in Heart of the Path. So just in brief, the ornament, Maitreya's ornament of Mahayana Sutras gives we talk about these 10 qualities. So for Mahayana, looking for a Mahayana guru, someone who's revealing the Mahayana teachings. So rely on a virtuous friend who is subdued, pacified, and highly pacified, has greater knowledge, has perseverance, is learned in scripture, has realized emptiness, is skillful in teaching, has a compassionate nature, and has abandoned discouragement. So some of these are translated in different terms here and there. But looking at the first three, so a virtuous friend, a teacher, a fully qualified Mahayana guru, who is subdued, pacified, and highly pacified. So like just here when we said, may they be dispelled, pacified, and completely pacified. So in one instance, we generally do that clapping to remind us of emptiness, but also it's very similar to looking here at these first three qualities, which are the three higher trainings. So the higher training of ethics, higher training of concentration, and higher training of wisdom. So the first one, to be subdued, your three doors well subdued, as it says in the Lama Chöpa, means the guru is living in the higher training of ethics. So that could be if a fully ordained monk, 227 or so vows, which of course, unless you're at that level, you don't know what those vows are. So you can't observe all those vows. But even a lay teacher will be living in Pratamoksha vows. or, so the different levels of vows according to the Vinaya, which in the case of monastics, we also have advice about in terms of ethical restraint, bodily restraint and so forth. So holding a, what do you call it? Disciplined demeanor, shall I say. Doesn't mean we're robots. Clearly not robots. But it's about, having tamed the actions of the body and of speech. We can't see whether somebody's tamed their mind, but we can see the indicators through actions and speech. In other words, having pure morality. And then being pacified, next one, is through the training in concentration. So being able to control the delusions by having achieved calm abiding or have some level of calm abiding, enough to be able to keep one's mind focused and in control. So to intention of that is to continuously keep the mind in virtue. So this is what we're wanting to do, keep our mind in virtue. And if we are able to do that, then we're able to more easily develop realizations because we're keeping our mind in sync with reality. And then that leads on to gaining great insight, which is highly pacified, or as it says here, completely pacified. So the higher training in wisdom. So here, it's not, in these first three, it's not referring to a realization of emptiness here necessarily. That comes later when it actually explicitly says has realized emptiness. Here, this insight can be the view of any of the schools. It could be mind-only schools. It could be any of the lower schools. So having developed the wisdom, conceptual wisdom, the Buddhist view of any of the tenet systems. So again, very difficult to see that. The way that we see that is through the presentation of the teachings and through examples given in the teachings as well. Of course, in the case of the Geshes with, 25 years having gone through those main texts, 5 texts for 5 years each, and knowing them very well and comprehensively, and we get the benefit of that. And they're able to pull in also examples that relate to us. And that relates to the next one of having greater knowledge than us. It says greater knowledge or realizations. Again, we can't tell their realizations, but I think it's very clear that greater knowledge that we can discern, because for learning anything, we need the teacher to have greater knowledge. Otherwise, we can't learn from them or we can't benefit from them. And it said that even that you regard even the fact that the teacher has received, say, transmissions of text or transmissions of mantras or so forth that you haven't, means they have greater knowledge than you. So there may be areas where they do, areas where they don't. With the transmissions, because there's so much great emphasis on the receiving lung transmissions, oral transmissions, in unbroken lineage that come, they can be traced back to Shakyamuni Buddha. And also that moving forward, that once we reach, higher up in the Bodhisattva grounds, those transmissions develop, ripen as realizations in our mental continuum. So they're very powerful, let's say, I was going to say imprints, but I think it's more powerful than like seeds on our mental continuum that needs those later conditions. Having perseverance, so as His Holiness the Dalai Lama often quotes, never give up. No matter what's going on, no matter what's happening, never give up. And to develop our heart, be compassionate, work for peace in your heart, peace in the world, never give up. And so this is having a long-term perspective, as His Holiness says, if you can practice or make decisions for the short term or the long term, always take the long term. The long term doesn't mean, our 15-year, 20-year plan. It means lifetimes, eons, future lives, so we make that decision. So having that perseverance, that not giving up, no matter what hardships are endured and so forth. So I certainly remember Geshe Sultans talking about when they were, growing up in Sarah J, and the food wasn't great. It changed when Lama Zopa Rinpoche had set up the FBMT, what was set up, the FBMT Sarah J food fund for the month. And now that Sarah J's, running that themselves. So they were able to be self-sustaining. But the food back then wasn't so great. And they didn't have much money, so that he'd said that use safety pins or staples to patch up their thongs. And having seen some of the rooms, you could say the conditions were very hard, but they were determined. It wasn't a question of, oh, well, this is too hard, I'm out of here. It was just like determined to get the precious teachings and really focused and not giving up. And then after all those 25 years of coming and encountering us Westerners, totally different culture, sometimes very isolated, and still not giving up, still determined to continue on, persevere, to pass on the Dharma, and being learned in scripture, so that, as we, is it distracting? We could close that.
Is it the heater next door?
I don't know what it is. It's next door, yeah. Maybe close it. It's just that sounds distracting. Don't mind it. The
Washing machine.
it's a washing machine. Okay, it's a washing machine. So not just that they've learned many scriptures, but they've committed them to heart and can draw on quotes from different scriptures in their one teaching, make references. So in the Heart of the Path, one example that Lama Zopa uses is Geshe Sorpa Rinpoche, who there was something it might have been a ritual or a teaching he had to give, that he hadn't read that text for 20 years and he wasn't sure that he still remembered it, but there it was, I'm just like, oh yeah, it's still there. I certainly remember when Geshe Samten one time told us a little bit about when they were, doing their Geshe exam, what it was like doing the oral exam. And so this is the debating. And they basically, he said, well, you've got a certain amount of time, right, allocation for the whole process. And when you come in, you're given a piece of paper, it has 3 questions on it. So if you take too much just time deciding which question to pick, then, minutes are going by or even seconds, time is going, time is ticking. And so he's sort of like, oh, not that one. And, it was sort of like, he had 2 there and it was like, I could do either one, but just had to quickly, And then he started talking about the process, and it was like you could see him, going to page and paragraph in the text, just having it right there. So having that quality. and being able to, refer to many teachings by heart, because also that's part of the training in the monastery when you see the monks rote learning by heart, from a younger age.
Sorry.
Yeah, go.
Huge intelligence.
Huge intelligence, yeah.
They all do.
Yeah.
The best scholars I know.
Yeah, they don't all become geshes, that's true. Yeah. So, and then, of course, having compassion. So even if a teacher has great knowledge, they're not going to necessarily help the student unless they have compassion, having a caring concern for the student. But not only that, given that we're in a Mahayana path, love and compassion are foundation for great compassion, foundation for bodhicitta. And this is what we need to learn. So we need a teacher who embodies those. At one of the retreats in Bendigo, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, I remember it was late. Well, wasn't late at night. It was early morning. It was about 2 a.m. And there was just a couple of us outside, and I heard Rinpoche talking to someone else, and his concern with one of the retreatants. He said, "Oh, I saw her crying. Is she all right?" And it's just like there were hundreds of people there, and Rinpoche's expressing his concern for that one. And, clearly being such a being who seems to ooze bodhicitta just through every pore.
Oh, treading on an ant. The retreat to the Bendigo retreat, on his way to teaching her, he said he trod on an ant and he's sure he heard it squeal.
And then having abandoned discouragement, this is often said, having great enthusiasm, like continue to have great enthusiasm for the teachings, abandoning a sense of impatience or exhaustion or laziness in guiding students, and not getting upset or discouraged when teaching the Dharma. Sometimes it's said not being disappointed in the students.
That's hard.
Or having patience, having patience with the students. Again, at the last retreat in Bendigo, I just thought Rinpoche was going, get it. He was showing manifesting in patience, because that sense of urgency that we need to get it, and given that, I often think this is their perseverance, not just this lifetime, over many lifetimes with us. We've had these connections before. And
you remember that young woman who did three days on emptiness or something? The voice asked the question, well, what is emptiness? And the whole Gompa just cracked up.
Yeah.
It was so fun. But he was so dignified, and he wasn't laughing.
No.
He just looked at us and said, "Can you help me?" Say it a different way. There's the only one there that didn't think it was funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah. It's and that's a perfectly valid question, to say what is emptiness? I've been hearing you teaching about this for days, and what is it?
Yeah.
So we have these 10 qualities where it has the realization of emptiness. Generally, it says, again, we're not going to know who has a realization of emptiness, but generally it says that to have an understanding, enough to be able to teach about it, to teach about emptiness for 3 days, and find many different ways of presenting that. And so generally it says to have those 10 qualities, and if not, as Geshe Potoa says, they should at least have the following 5: the realization of emptiness, compassion, greater understanding and qualities in a disciple, more moral pure, not more moral conduct, pure moral conduct, and no discouragement when teaching. Otherwise, the teacher, can't guide the disciple out of samsara. That's the idea. So again, with the non-discouragement or enthusiasm, particular examples, Geshe Sultram, who, has a very, at Chenrezig Institute, has quite a heavy load. After Easter, starting again the basic program, and it's quite a number of teaching days in the week. And someone commented to Geshe and he said, "I love teaching. Like I love teaching." Very demonstrative. So yeah. And then we have Asvagosha, or sometimes called Aryashura. This goes by a number of different names. In the 1st century, he wrote he composed the 50 verses of Guru devotion, which is tiny little booklet, or mostly it's online these days, teeny tiny, but just gem after gem after gem. You learn so much from that. It's really written from a Vajrayana perspective, because the whole presentation on needing a spiritual teacher is generally presented, within the Lamrim teachings, on the assumption that you're going on to tantric practice, and that's when we really need the spiritual teacher, like it says in the Guru Puja, that 43. Oh, yeah. You were wise, patient, honest, without pretense or guile. So that's another thing that's not mentioned here. So this is according to Vajrayana: wise, patient, honest, without pretense or guile. So we see that in the great humility of teachers. And when they're praised, the advice is to take that as a practice of humility, to be able to take that as a practice of humility. Your 3 doors well subdued, body, speech, and mind. You have both sets of 10 qualities. In other words, the Mahayana Sutrayana path, and then the Vajrayana path. No mantra and tantra, and are skilled in drawing and explaining, which comes around with the mandala. So these 50 verses of Guru devotion are presented in that context. But however, even without having any tantric endowments, looking at those qualities and looking how from the student side to relate in relation to the Guru, it's just really, really fantastic. So detailed, short and really detailed. And so Ashvagosha, who, the 50 verses was seen, 50 verses of Guru devotions, it was about the most comprehensive in terms of how to devoting yourself to a Guru in action, our actions. And he mentions 5 bad qualities to avoid when choosing a Guru. We don't choose we don't choose someone who doesn't have compassion. Okay, that's number 1. As I said, particularly in the Mahayana path, because we're wanting a teacher that's going to guide us all the way to enlightenment, guide us on the bodhisattva paths and grounds, which means bodhicitta, based on great compassion, based on loving, affectionate love. Don't choose a guru, someone who is impatient or has an angry nature or has pride. So you can see that already is not having pacified the mind. And if we're able to see that, they haven't pacified the body or the speech either, because we don't see their mind. We shouldn't choose a person who can't control their mind, in other words, their desire. And that, unfortunately, does happen. They're not controlling desire. I mean, we've had some cases that have hit the media recently. One that was, really shocking was in Sydney. This, I'm not sure if it was Vietnamese. Anyway, a temple, I think it was a reasonably small temple in, I think it was Vietnamese, in Sydney. And the actual organisation were trying to lock the teacher out. But he was living there, and they kept, it was very complicated. It got onto one of those, 60 Minutes or one of those programs. Gosh, you don't want that to happen. Because he'd been running businesses and going to brothels and denying all of this, and so it was none of their business and all of this. It's just like, we don't want that sort of reputation, As a Sangha, it's part of our duty, our obligation to not bring Buddhism into ill repute. So that was definitely bringing Buddhism into ill repute. At least, you could see that how upset all the students were there. They were just incredibly upset, and then it was their job to try and get rid of him. It should have been the other way around, but it wasn't. So these things are happening. So, yeah. So they knew that this wasn't the teacher they wanted. They wanted him gone. We shouldn't choose someone who's boastful, who, sort of advertises himself, some small quality they have, or, we have this, as the Buddha, following in the example of the Buddha, that a teacher doesn't teach unless requested. And this is why at the end of Geshe Sharab teaching, and then at the airport and all along the way, Geshe, please come back soon, continue their teachings and so forth. Because we've got to constantly request, and we have requests go in through FPMT and so forth, to Lama Zopa Rinpoche, Kandula, to these, now that people are traveling a little bit more, to get the teachings, because they may not, even they aren't able to come this year, next year, it doesn't stop you continuing to make those requests. Like we're told, make those requests every year. So, yeah. So definitely someone who doesn't advertise himself. And Lama Zopa Rinpoche, when he teaches on these qualities of the spiritual teacher, Rinpoche goes, "This is not an advertisement. I'm not advertising." And you can see that awkwardness. Yeah. So we want a teacher on the Mahayana path who's going to be emphasizing cherishing others, more than cherishing self. We want the opportunity to develop bodhicitta. We want those examples. And if we take Lama Zopa as a perfect example of that, Rinpoche teaches us, the Bodhisattva attitude book, it's just full of every action you do every day of thinking of others, turning on the lights, and turning on the light of wisdom in the world, and opening the door on the path to liberation, closing the door to the lower realms. And just everything you do becomes an act of bodhicitta. So we can see we have great confidence in that ability, that Rinpoche makes it easy for us to constantly be thinking about developing bodhicitta just by those examples. Even on the toilet, because some people say, "Oh no, you can't do your practice on the toilet." Rinpoche is very clear you can. No, especially Vajrasattva.
He was trying to think of a way, because he had a cold or something at that retreat, and blowing his nose into the tissues, and so he was trying to think of a way of turning that into bodhicitta action.
Good luck with that one, yeah. Well, even Rinpoche gets stumped sometimes. So that they, emphasize loving kindness, compassion, bodhicitta, and then failing that, obviously one that's a teacher. If we go through the three scopes, in the middle scope, that's going to be emphasizing liberation, looking, that's not attached to samsaric things, and emphasizing the need to achieve liberation. And the very least, if we're looking at the small scope, would be one that's emphasizing ethical conduct, and looking towards the happiness of future lives, not being caught up with worldly concerns. Right? So we can gauge it. Well, I can't say that, that they've developed some level of renunciation, if not like, His Holiness and Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and with perfect renunciation and perfect bodhicitta. We're so fortunate to have them as our teachers. Okay. So why we need those three things is because we need those three to progress on the path to enlightenment. And of course, the more time that we take, assessing a teacher for these qualities, the more that it's going to enable us to not fall into heresy, as it said, at some later time when we think, oh, I made a bad choice here. Not necessarily we made a bad choice, but sometimes the teachers themselves, we've had a history of some teachers appearing to have lost their ethical conduct or gone a bit strange, if not very strange. I asked one teacher who was at Jamyang when Geshe Kelsang Gyatso was there, who Lama Geshe appointed to that Manjushu Centre in London in the early 80s. And then I remember actually again, Dundrup, he was there too, and he said, it started to get very weird. Yeah. And I said, well, what do you do about that? You took him as your teacher, and this teacher said, he's there in the merit field, I just don't pay him attention. Like, he's there. It's sort of like, well, that's the teacher I had a long time ago. It's not saying, you're not dismissing them, because whatever teachings you got were valid. And we've had others recently, and people, when people come and say, oh, what do I do now? And it's just like, you respect the teachings you had, you don't let go of that. They are valid. Yeah. So then we look at the qualities of our side, the disciple, student, shall we say, more likely to say that these days. Oh, before I do that, this is a quote from the Buddha from the Tana Sutra. I quite like this because, anyway, you'll see why. It is through living together that a person's virtue may be known, and then only after a long period, not a short period, by one who is attentive, not by one who is inattentive, by one who is discerning, not by one who is not discerning. In other words, we have to use our wisdom, our discerning wisdom. We have to take time. When we say living together, we're not necessarily living in the same house, but being around, of course, we know that when we are living in the same house with someone, but having to, to watch attentively. If we don't, we've got to know those qualities that we're looking for, and we're not looking for faults, we're looking for the positive. Very easy for us to look for faults. And then, as the Buddha said, through dealing with a person, that we could say their purity may be known through our interactions. It's through adversity that a person's endurance may be known. When it says adversity, that, that saying, when the going gets tough, the tough stay. Stay. That's endurance, okay? Whatever hardship, whatever adversity comes along, just like at Sarah Jane Monastery when they were training, and just dealing with it all. And it's through discussion that a person's discernment, in other words, their wisdom, may be known, and then only after a long period, not a short period, by one who is attentive, not by one who is inattentive, by one who is discerning, not by one who's not discerning. So, in other words, we have to use our own wisdom to see how others respond in discussion or so forth in a way that is, it comes from a place of wisdom. For myself, when I used to go to, and still do, go to see Geshe Thubten, I said used to because in the earlier days, it was probably a little bit more formal process, whereas these days, we maybe have a bit more discussion. But Geshe was very succinct. Lama Zopa Rinpoche as well, very succinct, and just say that one thing, like, and I'd have this sort of whole complex blah blah in my mind. Fortunately, I didn't express it all. I didn't have a big long tail, but I just say some of it. But it felt so convoluted, and you just say one thing. That's it. Simple, right? So that wisdom mind that cuts through like all our confusion, I think, is a great quality. Okay, so then for us as students, so this is from Arya Deva in the 400 stanzas or 400 verses. So Arya Deva was a direct disciple of Nagarjuna, and the 400 verses is got the most amazing teachings on emptiness. So in relation to the qualities of a student, he said, a straightforward, wise, and interested listener is called a suitable vessel. Straightforward meaning honest, wise, and interested listener. He does not distort. They do not distort the virtues of the teacher, nor those of the disciples. So that also brings up that, when we talk about the pause of the guru, then, like Lama Zopa Rinpoche says, the pause of the guru, like, for example, in our centres, is everybody in the centres, with volunteers, the fellow students, and so forth. So that we have equal regard for each other. We won't necessarily see them as our teachers, but that we have regard for them, respect, honesty. Okay. So the teacher may have all these qualities, but then if the student doesn't bring to the party the qualities they need, then they won't get any benefit. They won't easily be led to enlightenment. So we need, from our side, as it said, to be a fit vessel, fit receptacle, to be able ourselves to bear hardships in order to get the teachings and practice the advice or the instructions of the guru. When you're told, do 800,000 or whatever of this, and I remember one teacher saying, Rinpoche gave her this practice to do, and she said, I can't possibly do that. And so then Rinpoche said, okay, do this, and it was more. I better stop right now. So I won't get this completed in this lifetime. As I discovered talking to Geshe Thubten about, Rinpoche had given me instructions pre-ordination, and I worked out in the next 10 days how many hours a day it would take me to do. And so I went and told Geshe Thubten, and at the meantime, I'm packing my bag and getting on a plane to New Zealand and blah, 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 blah. And Geshe just said, it means having it in your mind stream. So we get caught up in the numbers, but the idea of this many repetitions of whatever we've been told to repeat is the idea that it's in our mind stream. So I found that very useful. I still fulfilled the commitment, but it did mean I really then immersed myself in that text. At that time, I was writing it, I was reading it, Yeah. So that's quite a nice way to look at it, is that we're immersing our mind in that. So being unbiased, or it says impartial, it means having your mind open, not having a closed mind. There'd be no point we're wanting to get the teachings, but we're already opinionated. We're already opinionated enough as it is. So we're having to deal with that, aren't we? But to be open vessels to get the teachings, and really yearn for the teachings, really want the teachings. And as Geshe Zopa often says, that even people who don't get the teachings, that sense of they hear about the teachings and want the teachings and want to get to the teachings, is already the result of vast accumulations of a merit in previous lives. And so that given that opportunity, even you can't make it. And, it really hit me actually when Chodron Rinpoche, first time Chodron Rinpoche came in, when Rinpoche was teaching in Sydney, I was there to greet Rinpoche, and then 2 days later I was in hospital and remained there, in and out of hospital. And I was so upset that I wasn't at the teachings. I did get advice from Chodron Rinpoche, which was great. So I immersed myself, and somebody would bring me recordings of the teachings every day, and so forth and so forth. But as a result of that, I came here for the teachings that I had missed. And even then, it was touch and go. I was still not well. But Rinpoche, Geshe Thubten had asked Rinpoche at the airport, would I be okay to fly? And before the medics had said I was okay to fly, he said I was okay to fly, and that's all I needed. So book the ticket. And it's that sense of, okay, I'm enduring this hardship to get the teachings. Also because Rinpoche had said better than having that suffering was better than eons of hot hells. And I thought, okay, I'll take it. I think I can take it. So it's that sense of it's not necessarily looking for those opportunities, but it made me realize that obstacles do arise and can arise, and we do our best to overcome those. When everything falls into a place and it's just a matter of choice whether I walk from here to there, it's easy, right? But when obstacles arise, and they do for all of us, always, not all the time, hopefully. Yeah. So it's that idea of we're prepared to bear whatever hardships to get the teachings. Yeah. And we have all those examples like of Milarepa and so forth, who have had both incredibly strong and incredible perseverance, incredible stamina to bear vast, great hardships. If you think of Milarepa's story, I think if that happened these days, I mean, Marpa would have been sued. What do you mean, not being allowed to come into the teachings? I mean, that for a start. But then when he did go into retreat and bearing hardships of hunger and thirst and cold and being prepared to do that, and it's said that when that level of being able to bear that level of hardship and the guru, meeting that perfect guru, then you're able to achieve enlightenment in one lifetime, which is what happened for Milarepa. Of course, without knowing what he had already prepared in previous lives. But in any case, it's however much effort we put in, as it says in the foundation of all good qualities, is a kind and perfect pure good, correct devotion to him as the root of the path, by clearly seeing this and applying great effort. Please bless me to correctly respect, follow the Guru with great respect, follow the Guru with great respect. So we do have to put in effort. This will probably know by now. We do have to put in effort. So they're being intelligent is not being intelligent so that I get all the teachings in the first go, but being intelligent to distinguish what is right from what is wrong. Now, there are different levels of being able to distinguish that. If we're a beginner student, someone coming in for the first time and they're taught this and that, there might be things that you might discern of that this doesn't sound right. What we're talking right or wrong is not, facts or things, sort of numbers, things like that. As Venerable Roger says about Lama Zopa Rinpoche, mathematics is not his forte, because everything's gazillions and trillions and, whatever anyway. So it's not getting caught up in that sort of thing, but that the right view is being presented. That's what it's really talking about, the Buddha Dharma is being presented correctly. And it's not always, as a beginner, to be able to detect that. As we go along more, we can. Although, some people who ended up in those, NKT centres just felt something was wrong, which was, probably their virtuous karma from previously, that it's just like something didn't feel right. And that's very helpful then, because you can, they were able to find somewhere that did feel right. Okay, so then having these qualities and having searched diligently and observed diligently and so forth, what establishes a guru-disciple relationship? It's not just getting teachings. Sure, that establishes a Dharma connection, but it's for someone to be our teacher arises in your mind that this is my teacher. You think of yourself as their student and you think of them as your teacher, even they've given you one verse of teaching or a transmission of a mantra or something. So that establishes that connection. You don't have to ask them to be your teacher. In fact, Lama Zopa says it's a bit like asking your parents to be your parents after you're already born. That's sort of like the relationship's established. So yeah, will you be my teacher? Yeah, of course. His Holiness the Dalai Lama, somebody went up in a teaching one time, one woman, and nobody else dared do something like this, but said to His Holiness, will you be my teacher? And he said, of course. Anyway, all right. So then, now that we've established a connection with the teacher, then it's what's our obligation from our side in relation to that? So how do we properly rely on the spiritual teacher? And so this is in two ways, through action and through thought. Usually the one through thought is presented first. So we have training in our attitudes, in faith in the Guru, in the spiritual teacher. Of course, not blind faith, as the Buddha said. You check up if it's, if anything I've said is truthful, not just because I said it. You check it like you would check gold and burn and rub and melt and cut it and check it's the real deal. So it's faith in our spiritual teacher, of course, is a virtue. Faith is presented as one of the virtuous qualities, virtuous mental factors, but it has to be guided by our own wisdom. so to not get us into trouble. So His Holiness talked about this in relation to the Tibetans, saying, we Tibetans generally have so much faith that we take Dharma practices for granted. A problem is we usually only observe those teachings that feed our delusions and ignore those that would overcome them. This can lead to one's downfall. This is why I call the teachings on seeing all the Guru's actions as perfect a poison. Many sectarian problems in Tibet were born and nourished by it. That's the Dalai Lama speaking. So what he's saying about the Guru's action, all the Guru's actions as perfect. Clearly, if we see actions that are against the law, or in the case, one of the examples I think the Dalai Lama was talking about, when it got to a point in Tibet where if a Lama had a lot of ostentatious clothes and wealth and so forth, it meant they must be a great Guru, you know, whereas we would probably err on the other side in relation to that. So just, you know, using our wisdom. I remember one student saying that when the Geshe's on the throne, he's the teacher. When he's off the throne, he's not the teacher. Now, that might be going too far, because you take examples like Lama Zopa Rinpoche or His Holiness and so forth. When are they not teaching? You know, every moment's a teaching. But if, you know, we're not going to necessarily vote for a political party because they vote for a political party. You know, what we're here is for the Dharma. We want them as our Dharma teacher. So we have to use our wisdom in that way. So Lama Tsongkhapa said, keep the master's good qualities in mind, never seize upon the faults. Keeping their good qualities in mind, you will reach attainments. Seizing upon their faults, you will not. So here, and it's really emphasized a lot. Lama Zopa Rinpoche emphasizes this a lot. Lama Tsongkhapa emphasizes this a lot. So what we're saying is that we're looking at the good qualities. That's what we're told to look for, because we want those qualities that are going to help us on the path to enlightenment. That's what we're looking for, looking at. And, you know, we're very attuned to looking at faults in people. When we start to do that, we start to look with ordinary eyes, you know, and not the precious Dharma, you know, connection. And what do we really want from them? We really want them to guide us on the path to enlightenment. So if I go to a mechanic, I want a good mechanic that has the qualities of fixing the car. I don't care in that instance whether they smoke. I'm not saying our gurus smoke. For Sangha, that's a no-no, by the way. Whether they hang out at the pub, whether they swear their head off. Well, I might be a little bit upset, but, you know, I really just want them to fix my car. You know what I mean? I really just want you to go near to enlightenment. But it becomes more critical, I guess, in relation to our spiritual teachers, because we've taught in terms of ethical conduct, that's the thing that we most see, right? Their conduct, how they carry themselves, how they speak, how they act. So that's really super, super important. And in one of the presentations of the teaching, it says that they must be, you know, gifted in speech. And if you think about that, they have to be skilled in teaching according to level of the students. But to say gifted in speech, if, for example, you know, that for many years pre-stroke, Lama Zopa Rinpoche would have this cough. And from my side, I would always think, oh gosh, we must have so much polluted this atmosphere that Rinpoche needs to clear the air or something. Rinpoche doesn't manifest that cough anymore. But some people would be really upset by that because of the delivery. And yet, just think how profound, you put that aside and just focus on the teachings, and the teachings are profound. So that's the benefit that you get, where if you focus on a mere cough or whatever, then that we're the ones losing out to get the benefit of the teachings. And that we're, on the other side, if we looked at our own faults, it'd be much greater than the qualities that we're bringing from our side. So in whatever way, training ourselves to just focus on the good qualities, and then we're going to get more out of the teachings. So Lama Tsongkhapa also said, when you recognize someone to be Buddha, you will not discern faults in that person. You will pay attention to their good qualities. That's really true. If we think that this, for me, as the Buddha said, I will manifest in future lives as the teacher. That's, where his disciples were grieving because the Buddha was passing from that body. And so it is true when we think, oh, I'm getting the precious Dharma from this teacher. This is a Buddha. I'm getting the precious teachings, the pure Dharma. Even when I don't understand it, of thinking that, it's coming from the Buddha. Like, I would often sit like this in basic program with Geshe Thubten. Some people would just cry and leave. Sat there and just thought, just think that the golden light's coming from the Buddha, the Dharma's coming in, and sometime in the future, lifetimes, it'll sink in, imprints. And in that way, you're just focusing on the good qualities of the teacher, that they're transmitting the Dharma. If they're a Sangha member, they're upholding more vows than you are as a lay person, and so forth and so forth. So many ways we can train our mind to think like that. And as it says, keep, as Lama Tsongkhapa said, keep the masters. So that's plural. So we can have as many teachers as we want, but not in a way of, oh, well, I'll get a second opinion on that. Not like that. But as Lama Zopa Rinpoche has many teachers, he's got teachers from different traditions. He's helped keeping different traditions alive, so that we'll have different, we can have as many teachings as we want, but there's usually one, sort of person, maybe two, that we see as our root guru to really, hold in our heart and develop our mind in relation to them. And then, as with Lama Zopa Rinpoche, anybody that is teaching at centres is appointed by Lama Zopa Rinpoche, so you can see it as pause of the Guru. Yeah. Okay, that one's done. Yeah. So we have all these ways of training our mind to think as it has in the Guru Puja, that the Guru, the kindness of the Guru, the kindness even than all the Buddhas, kinder than Shakyamuni Buddha in particular. Not that Shakyamuni Buddha wasn't, limitlessly kind, but that we weren't able to be tamed by Shakyamuni Buddha in that lifetime. And so here we have an emanation in this life arising as our teacher, who is prepared to take human form, and just like His Holiness the Dalai Lama suffers from colds and cancers and problems with his knees and so forth and so forth. For what? For our benefit, for the benefit of the world. And we see that, So when it says in the Guru Puja, when the sun of the Muni sets, that's Shakyamuni Buddha, because of the times, you enact the deeds of a conqueror. So the teacher enacts the Buddha's deeds for the many transmigratory beings who like a refuge savior. Actually, this is more relevant. To those untamed by countless past Buddhas, the unruly transmigratory beings of this degenerate age who are difficult to subdue. I count myself in there. Unruly transmigratory beings of this degenerate age who are difficult to subdue. You accurately show the good way of those gone to bliss. Of course, the unruly transmigratory beings is a continuum of beings, but the fact that here we are wanting to, gain the realizations on the path to enlightenment in such a time as this, when it's much harder. It's like the 10 innermost jewels of the Kadampa masters, of going against the grain, going against society in a way, the norms of that society in many ways, or maybe the pressures of our family or friends. So we think of the teacher's kindness in providing the teachings, that in blessing the mind stream. So the Tibetan word jinlab, blessing usually is referred to as coming through like transmissions, and the blessing of the lineage of the teachings, when, I don't think Geshe Sharab indicated this, but often indicate, I got this teaching from my teacher so-and-so who received from so-and-so who received from, so that we can trace back that lineage. And gaining these blessings, sometimes we think we're just going to be zapped from above or so forth. And I remember one of my teachers at Kopan saying that after about 8 years of going to teachings with Lama Zopa Rinpoche, suddenly there was this, like one of those experiences, and that completely transformed her relationship with Rinpoche from her side. Because if we think about devoting ourselves to a teacher, it's all about us. It's all about what we're doing from outside. They're ready to give us everything, and it's us coming to the party. We recite the name mantras of our gurus that we have mantras of. We offer long life pujas, and we think about the teacher's kindness also by offering their kindness in offering material gifts, so that Venerable Roger Kopan one time was asked to talk about the history of FPMT, and instead he came and talked about how it was in the early days at Kopan with Lama Zopa Rinpoche, when they were in a tent, and Lama Yeshe, they were in a tent, and the conditions. And this was at a time with this group of students who were just wondering if they'd ever see their washing again, because it got sent off to the Didi to do the washing. She was in hospital and her daughter was having difficulty trying to cope with everything. And so it was like 2 weeks I've been wearing the same thing. Well, I get my clothes back. And so then when we heard Venerable Roger talking how it was pretty austere, let's say. They were prepared to suffer many hardships. One of the things was that he talked about was that he was then attending Lama Yeshe, and Lama Yeshe would say to him, go and get the offerings from Zopa. Go and get the offerings from Lama Zopa Rinpoche before he gives them all away. And he said he never got there on time. And that one time he got on this lower robe, the Shamta, Rinpoche had just given that away. Roger comes in and we have a underskirt, and Rinpoche was in his underskirt, and said, where's your Shamta? And he says, oh, that Geshe who just went, he needed it, I gave it to him. And it's like, okay, we're going to the airport. We better find you something. So offering material gifts, or, offering meals to their students or so forth. I have to say I was very fortunate and rather overwhelmed the morning I was leaving the Chenrezig Institute to come here. Geshe Sultram had already invited myself and now Venerable Pekka, then Venerable Yangshan, up to have breakfast. And I'd sort of scheduled that into my stressful getting packed on time and vacating the hut and so forth. And we're both gluten-free. So not only did Geshe cook us breakfast, he cooked gluten-free pancakes. And I'm like, unbelievable. Such kindness, such wonderful kindness. So all of this, sort of material goods, it's not, it's really just attracting us into that circle, connecting us. Or like Lama Zopa Rinpoche offering all the monks for so many years, the food fund so that they'd be able to eat well, to be able to study well, offering to Sangha, like every time there's a Buddha Day, Rinpoche offers a meal in the nunneries and monasteries, offers a meal to all the Sangha. And many people talk about having been offered meals by Lama Yeshe or Lama Zopa Rinpoche as well, like that, that they may have cooked. I remember at the Lamp of the Path, actually, one time. It might have happened every time, actually. And the last night, Rinpoche would take us all out to a restaurant. And there were quite a significant number of people there. Yeah. Okay. So then how we relate back to the teacher in offering from our side, offering material gifts. So we do that. We might offer medicines, or we make offerings to the teacher. We might make offerings of things they actually like or need. I always, for Geshe Thubten, try to find the hottest chili paste I can find. It's sometimes hot enough. Or when my mother was alive, she was growing chilies, so I'd bring him the chilies. Yeah, I knew he liked that. So there's 3 offerings: offering of material gifts, which is probably the least meritorious one. It is meritorious. It's very meritorious. Offering respect and serving the teacher with our body and with our speech is a middling one. So we might be volunteering here or taking on roles in the centre that's serving Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and or serving them one-on-one. We hear the stories of like Drang Tompa serving Lama Atisha, and then towards the end of his life, and when he was bedridden and taking down his kaka and being prepared to do anything for him. Similarly, Geshe Sultram did for his teacher, previous abbot of Sarah J, and that he was the one caring for him at the end of his life, to the extent that he put off his Geshe graduation to be able to care for his teacher. And when you hear the stories of how much care he gave his teacher, it's quite amazing. I mean, to have that opportunity is quite amazing. We most likely won't be in that sort of situation ourselves, but being prepared to, serve your teacher. And the main one, the best one, of course, is the practice. Whatever they instruct, advise to do, to practice according to their instructions. And the essence of that is to do it swiftly, to do it as quickly as possible, to practice straight away, possibly, if they say do this many whatevers. And that doesn't have to be a personal instruction. If you see the number of instructions we've had from His Holiness, from Lama Zopa Rinpoche in response to the war in Ukraine, in response to COVID, of situations as they arise in the world, and we can all participate in that. And I myself, I like to participate in the prayer-a-thon, IMI prayer-a-thon when I can, which now the prayers, it started off COVID and for the pandemic to decline, now that it has declined. Now it's for, well, basically for world peace, but for the war in between Russia and Ukraine to decline. And it's, you know, Rinpoche is very explicit about particularly for peace to arise in the mind of Putin and to enable that to come about, so that we get these general instructions a lot of the time from Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and it's a wonderful opportunity to use those. We did previously for earthquake when there was a year where there was a lot of threats of earthquakes. Mind you, look at the earthquakes we've had this year. And Rinpoche gave us a commitment, I think it was for Sangha, the commitment to do, I remember all the nuns were up there doing, and it was millions of these Pishitikaba long mantra, not the short, the long one. Yeah. But it's great because you feel like you're part of this worldwide activity of, you know, gathering together the merit and following the Guru's advice, but also our own, any personal advice we're given as well too. And then to let them know that you've completed that, and then you probably get some more things to do. But that's what we're here for, isn't it?
Well, what else would I do?
What else would I, yeah, what else would I be doing? Yeah, yeah, yeah. We asked for it. Yeah. Nobody's made us do it. Okay, so we'll stop there for tonight. Oh, wow.
My previous notes were from about the middle of February.
Yeah, I know, it's been so disjointed, hasn't it? Yeah, it's been really disjointed. Sundays as well. So I'm going to get it back on track. Yeah. Kewadihino hodora lahama sangye rudyone